George Washington once said, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving peace."
And to be prepared for presidential war, one must listen to the Dead Presidents Podcast.
Presidential war. What is it good for intellectual stimulation? Say it again now. Presidential war. What is it good for preserving the nation? Presidential war.
Hello and welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast. I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And I'm James J. Hamilton.
And this is another exciting installment of Presidential War.
That's right, and we're inaugurating yet another iteration of the game.
Yeah, an exciting new version.
Yeah, we're figuring out new ways to play Presidential War, a game of endless possibilities.
That's just it. So what do we got this time, James? This is an interesting iteration. This is going to come down to a sort of gamble.
Yeah, we're kind of blending our draw variety with category variety. We're each going to draw 4 cards. Then we're going to flip over 2 categories. We're going to choose 2 of our 4 presidents to go with those categories. Then we're going to flip 2 more categories, and we'll be stuck with our last 2 cards to go with those categories.
That's it. All kinds of exciting ways to try and play Presidential War.
We're now going to draw our first 4 cards and flip over our first 2 categories.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. Category-wise, we have, who would you hire as your lawyer if you were accused of murder? And post-presidential accomplishments. Already faced with a bit of a tough choice.
I as well.
There's an easy joke for me to make that I can't without spoiling the game.
Yeah, I feel like the guy I want to pick for both of these categories is the same guy, and he's not really highly regarded as a great president, but...
Okay, so decisions have been made. So let's start with, who would you hire as your lawyer if you were accused of murder? Now, I made my choice because this man was a lawyer of people accused of murder, none other than John Adams.
And I made my choice because this man was a lawyer who murdered people.
Well,
Andrew Jackson.
there you go. Andrew Jackson and John Adams. I feel like if John Adams is able to get some redcoats off the hook for the Boston Massacre, he could do well by me. I feel he's a safe choice.
Andrew Jackson was a frontier lawyer, went all the way to the Supreme Court of Tennessee, and he also shot a man in the chest, killing him, and faced no legal repercussions for it.
That's right.
I feel like certainly if I killed someone in a duel, I'd want Andrew Jackson defending me.
Yeah, he might defend you with a pistol.
Yeah, if these 2 lawyers were on opposite sides of a trial and things got out of hand, maybe Andy Jackson would be challenging John Adams to a duel.
You never know.
John Adams would probably ignore that.
I believe he would. I don't know. I think Andrew Jackson's an interesting choice because he'd been involved in this kind of thing. But I feel confident in John Adams.
Yeah, I think John Adams is probably a much more talented lawyer than Andy Jackson.
Yeah, when you look at the Boston Massacre trial.
Yeah, I don't know that
Adams kind of stuck his neck out there a little bit, you know, and he did a stand-up job as an objective lawyer, you know.
Yeah, that's really a great choice here. I don't know if any president has the kind of track record in this category that John Adams does.
None that I can think of off the top of my head.
There's probably some other presidents who defended people on murder charges.
Oh, sure. We talked about Pierce and
yeah.
different people, but
Maybe not as
Adams
high
is
profile a case, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the highest profile
So,
among the presidents.
we'll have John Adams take this category.
And we'll move on to post-presidential accomplishments. And I hated to play this one because, in all the games of war we've done, this has happened a monumental amount of times. A ludicrous amount of times. To the point where we don't even need to talk about it because our listeners, it's ingrained in their heads.
It's got to be James Madison.
That's correct. It's James Madison.
Well, I went with Millard Fillmore. I didn't have a lot of big post-presidential accomplishments in my hand, but
Yeah.
Millard Fillmore, post-presidentially, ran for president as a third-party candidate and won a state.
Yeah.
That won the state of Maryland as the Know Nothing Party candidate in 1856. He stayed loyal to the Union, of course, during the Civil War. Married a rich woman.
Yeah, and of course, Madison, you got University of Virginia. You got, he's a sage.
Yep.
At this point,
I believe he was part of the Virginia Constitutional Convention of 1820-something.
Yeah.
He denounced nullification.
Right.
Held on to the Constitutional Convention notes.
Yeah, he's staying bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's probably going to best Millard Fillmore here.
Yeah. I
guess it was
it's tough with some of those early founding fathers.
Yeah. For Fillmore, also, it was, I believe, post-presidential that he met Queen Victoria, and she praised him as the most handsome man she ever met.
That's it. But with your post-presidential accomplishments among the early founding father presidents, they're all such legends in their own time that it's hard to beat them even a decade later.
Yeah.
That's a tough rap. Now, there was another person that I was thinking of picking for that category based on the first question, because in their post-presidential accomplishments, pretty much gotten away with murder. That may be a spoiler, but we'll see as we flip up two new categories here. What could they be? Oh boy, we got some good ones. We got Who Would You Pick First and Flag Football, and we got First Lady Looks. So let's see if we're shafted with our choices here. I definitely am.
I'm kind of shafted as well. I really have no choice here.
Well, let's look at flag football. Who's getting picked first? Is it going to be Bill Clinton?
Well, this is a guy that I could not pick for First Lady Looks because it's James Buchanan. He was never married and is therefore stuck on the flag football field.
Yeah, see, Clinton, post-presidential accomplishments, I was like, well, he got away with, murdering all kinds of people.
Yeah.
That's
allegedly
pretty big accomplishment. But I would certainly choose him over the nearsighted in one eye, farsighted in the other eye, winking, fidgeting James Buchanan.
Yeah. I couldn't really argue with that. I don't think Bill Clinton is all that really athletic himself, but...
Oh, he would jog down to McDonald's.
Yeah. That's something. And I think James Buchanan doesn't even have that. So, yeah, Buchanan, not really much of a physical specimen in terms of athletic prowess.
Not really. He's got that paunch and, his eye troubles, and he's not going to be great on the gridiron.
No.
Clinton, he'd hold his own.
He's going to win this category.
And that'll bring us to First Lady Looks.
I had to go with a guy who would have beat Bill Clinton in flag football, but since he's the only one with an actual wife, for this category, I got George W. Bush, who's bringing Laura Bush to the table.
There we go, and I got Woodrow Wilson, who's bringing Ellen and Edith Wilson, respectively.
And I don't think the two of them can combine their looks to equal Laura Bush.
I'm going to totally agree with that statement.
George W. Bush did pretty well for himself when he hooked up with her. Wilson had 2 very devoted wives as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not saying they were dogs or nothing.
No.
Well,
I don't know. I thought they're pretty decent.
sure. But Deese ain't gonna cut it.
Not in this category.
No, sir.
George W. Bush.
Laura Bush.
Laura.
Gonna walk away with it.
Taking the category.
At the barbecue.
And now, that's right. That's where they met. A fateful barbecue that culminated in my victory in this hand.
That's right. Yeah.
We're going to draw 4 new cards and take on 2 new categories.
Let's see what we get. Oh, we have who would make the best legislator and who would make the best attorney general. So some interesting stuff here.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I've got 4 cards. None of them are lawyers.
Yeah, well, I had
know.
a couple lawyers.
I don't know who I'm bringing
but trying to choose them.
Attorney General.
Yeah, it can be tough.
Damn it. I am not getting the luck of the draw here in the early stages of the game. Well, we'll see what happens.
Alrighty, who was going to make the best legislator here? We have a choice between Jerry Ford
and Senator Warren Harding.
Okay, now. So Warren Harding's background, newspaper man from Marion, Ohio. Interesting election, 1920, and we're going to be talking about that in episode 29. 2 Ohio newspaper men going head-to-head for the presidency in 1920.
Wow.
Probably the dullest race in history. But on the other side of the coin, Jerry Ford, who, as we've talked about numerous times, he turned down a football career to enter politics and had a pretty storied career in the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
There's not too many people that they would say, hey, look, we've decided to pick you for vice president. Mm-hmm. And that's good by all of us.
Yeah, obviously very well respected by his fellow legislators.
Sure. I mean, he had work on the Warren Commission, with JFK's assassination, and he was involved in a lot of pretty heavy-duty stuff.
Mm-hmm. Warren Harding served 6 years in the Senate, 1 Senate term before becoming president. Complete Book of U.S. Presidents here says that Harding introduced 134 bills during his term, none significant.
Ouch.
His boldest effort was to join Henry Cabot Lodge in destroying the League of Nations.
Well, there is that.
It says, quote, Harding's Senate career was undistinguished.
Yeah. Now, when I'm looking at these 2 guys, Jerry Ford strikes me as somebody that is going to put himself into the job for the people.
Yeah.
Whereas Warren Harding might be somebody to put himself into the job kind of for the benefits of the job. I hate to sound, if that sounds unfair, well,
check out the upcoming Warren Harding episode.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting one.
Indeed.
But
yeah, he was an interesting president, that's for sure.
I think he's going to have to fall to Jerry Ford in this category.
I feel like he would.
Yeah.
I think Jerry Ford would be better connected with the people than Warren Harding. Warren Harding might be scoping the crowd for broads or something.
True.
And that'll bring us to who's going to make the better Attorney General. And we have Rutherford B. Hayes going up against
Zachary Taylor.
Okay, well, one of these guys has a background in the law.
Zachary Taylor would never read no darn law books.
No.
Waste his time with that. He'd
Well,
be Attorney General from the gut.
That's it.
Until his gut was eviscerated by
Cholera.
By an unfortunate
unfortunate
ice cream
bout
dessert.
by an unfortunate dessert choice. Now, Rutherford Hayes, I mean, he's got a background in the law.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pretty successful lawyer.
Yeah.
For his time in Ohio, and he is able to turn that into a successful career in Congress, and he had a pretty classic rise, I would say.
Yeah, Rutherford Hayes is the kind of guy who you could easily see being Attorney General.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of right up his alley.
I think so.
I think he'd be pretty great at it.
He probably would. I mean, I don't think Zachary Taylor would necessarily be terrible. Military justice and the actual practicing of law, there's a pretty big division there.
Well, as president, he threatened to hang potential secessionists. He could perhaps wield the powers of the Justice Department to preserve the Union.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had no legal training. It's not really up his alley.
Yeah.
So much. But I had no lawyers in my hand to go with.
Yeah.
Pretty. I wonder what are the odds to draw 4 presidents and none of them be lawyers.
Yeah, that's got to be.
Probably more than half
really,
of them.
really low odds.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the 2 guys I saved for future categories, I'll get something that they can win in.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens here. Let's see what we got coming up next. We got First Lady accomplishments, and we got who would make the best Secretary of State. Ouch. Okay, and I think we both kind of went with things by default here. That was a quick place down. So First Lady accomplishments, we have William Henry Harrison going up against Ulysses S. Grant. Okay.
Well, I've got Julia Grant here. I feel like she was named in this category recently. One of her, actually a pretty great accomplishment of Julia Grant, is that she kept Ulysses Grant from drinking when she was around him, which she could not be there throughout the Civil War, but when he was in the White House, he kept things pretty dry, which was pretty important, because if you had the Grant of some of his more outrageous Civil War benders as president, that would have been a big problem. Julia keeping him under control. She entertained lavishly as First Lady, including a big White House wedding for their daughter. She really loved being First Lady. And also, I think we mentioned before, one of her great accomplishments, her bitter dislike of Mary Todd Lincoln prompted the Grants to decline an invitation to Ford's Theater when Grant could have possibly been murdered alongside Lincoln.
Yeah, there's that. And then on the other side, you got Anna Sims, who married William Henry Harrison when she was 20 and he was 22. And she was the daughter of John Cleves Sims, Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court, later a prominent landowner in southwestern Ohio. She was the only woman to be both the wife of one president and grandmother of another.
That's something.
Yeah, their courtship was kind of wild.
Do tell.
Now, Anna's father initially disapproved of Lieutenant William Henry Harrison, largely because he wanted to spare his daughter the hardships of army camp life. Now, despite her father's decree that the two stop seeing each other, the courtship is going to flourish behind his back, and on a day that he is away in Cincinnati on business, Anna and William hastily get married, and they spend their honeymoon at Fort Washington. Harrison still on duty at the time. 2 weeks later, at a farewell dinner for General Mad Anthony Wayne, Father Sims confronts his son-in-law for the first time since the wedding. Addressing him sternly, he demands to know how he intended to support his daughter. Harrison shoots back, quote, "By my sword, sir, and my good right arm."
Nice.
And of course, she's not going to accompany him to Washington due to illness. So not much of a real first lady.
Yeah, of course, he died 31 days in before she could even get to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Never really took her place as First Lady. Her accomplishment being she married the man of her choice against her father's wishes.
That's right. Which, sure, that's an accomplishment, but I think we got to give it to Julia Grant.
Yeah. Julia Grant, prevailing in this category. Which brings us to who would make the best Secretary of State. I went with George Washington.
Ooh, this is going to be a battle of the ages because I went with Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
What a match. Secretary of State, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. Whoa, it's the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
You can't lose
Yeah.
with either one of them, really. I think Washington just reeks of the presidency. It's just, we're kind of spoiled in that line of thought.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only man who could lead the country. Him in a secondary position, I don't know. I really don't know. Like, if after the Revolutionary War and they wanted George Washington to be president and he was like, well, I'll be Secretary of State instead. And you could pick a different president. I don't think things would have gone as well.
Well, I think
But
he'd
that,
be
of
pretty
course, is
good.
placing it in a certain time. I think, yeah, of course, I think he would do well.
When he has to meet with foreign diplomats and negotiate, if he were to go abroad to negotiate a treaty, no one would have more gravitas.
Yeah. Well, let's think about their secretaries of state as well. With Lincoln, you got Seward. And Lincoln is going to go behind Seward's back in a couple instances, especially with the Confederate peace negotiations, when they're trying to get the 13th Amendment through. Mm-hmm. Lincoln is kind of taking on more of that role, in a sense. Washington, he's got to deal with fights between Jefferson and Hamilton, which is rough. Yeah. And made even more rough because this is the infancy of the country. Mm-hmm. And Lincoln, it's like we're trying to save the country.
You got Washington he declares neutrality in the war between Britain and France without, Jefferson necessarily being on board with that.
Yeah.
So he's also kind of going over the head of his Secretary of State.
That's it. Boy, this is a good battle.
George Washington had, kind of the showdown with the French minister Genet, who threatened to go over George Washington's head to appeal to the American people. Right. Washington not taking too kindly to that.
Washington's no nonsense, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the takeaway from Lincoln.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because neither of them ever, they weren't like directly in, diplomatic posts or abroad.
Yeah.
But you would think that, either of them would be pretty skilled.
Oh, I think either of them would have been fantastic in the role.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would depend on who the president was.
Mm-hmm.
Really is what it would come down to between these two, because I don't think that either of them would be bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to see George Washington serving under anybody because no one...
That's the thing.
Even maybe if it was like Ben Franklin or something.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing in my mind is I'm trying to picture, like, who would George Washington be subservient to,
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. Whereas you could have easily seen, like, Seward getting the Republican nomination in 1860 and
sure,
putting Lincoln in his cabinet.
Yeah.
And he'd fit right in there because Lincoln was not of huge stature at the time.
Yeah. That maybe seems a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, that's really tough. I don't know what to say about this one.
I really don't either. I'm almost thinking we need to figure out what to do in the event of a tie.
Yeah.
Because who would have thought that, well, that's just the thing with presidential war. You never know what's going to happen. But, yeah, this is a heck of an argument.
Yeah, like we said, it's hard to imagine Washington serving under anybody, but,
Yeah.
he really didn't want to be president, and if Ben Franklin had been a younger, perhaps healthier man, he might have been able to become the first president. He could ask Washington to be Secretary of State.
Yeah.
I think, at least up to the point where prior to these two becoming president, Washington had more, you could say, kind of like foreign policy, diplomatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of, he's general negotiating with the British about
Right.
various things, and then the French, when they come over and serve as their allies, he has to navigate that situation.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thinking about, like, Seward becoming president in 1860 and naming Lincoln as Secretary of State, that seems, like, plausible.
Yeah.
And Lincoln would probably be great. But, like, I don't know, any role Washington would have been installed in, I think he would have excelled in.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards him here.
Yeah, I think I'd probably lean towards him only because of his more broader foreign policy
Yeah, he's had to deal with
experience.
foreign powers more than Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go Washington.
We'll have him edge out Abe Lincoln. That was an epic battle.
Yeah, that's for sure. That amongst the most epic draws in the history of presidential war.
Wow.
And that'll bring us to 4 more cards.
We'll see if the epicness can continue as we draw 2 new categories.
Ooh, we got biggest election victories, and we have biggest partier. I felt like that one was easy for me. See if it works out. But
Wow. This is interesting because I have 4 presidents who all lost presidential elections.
oh boy.
Let's see. Well, I'm going to go with this guy in terms of partier. All right. For biggest election victories, I'm going Martin Van Buren.
Okay, and he is going up against Ronald Reagan.
Well,
And Reagan, of course, you have 1980. He captured 51% of the popular vote over incumbent President Carter, who captured 41%. And electorally, Reagan 489 to Carter's 49.
wow.
And then in 84, you had Reagan v. Mondale, Reagan capturing 59% of the popular vote to Mondale's 41, and the electoral vote even more crushing, 525 to Mondale's 13.
Wow.
A huge victory.
That's right. And then
And of course, he had, been elected governor of California, and,
Van Buren was elected president in 1836 with 51% of the vote. He had 170 electoral votes against, well, of course, that election, the Whigs really couldn't unite around one candidate.
that's it.
They had William Henry Harrison. They had Webster, White, Willie P. Mangum receiving electoral votes, totaling approximately, looking like about 120-ish to Van Buren with 170. And then, of course, 4 years later, he was soundly beaten by William Henry Harrison.
Yeah. And then when he tried to run again, didn't quite work out.
Yeah, didn't get the nomination in 1844. Ran as a third-party free soil candidate in 1848.
Not cutting the butter,
No.
but the Ronald Reagan will certainly cut the butter.
He's quite a butter cutter in this category.
Indeed.
And that'll bring us to biggest partier. And I went with Grover Cleveland.
Grover Cleveland, and I went with Franklin Pierce.
Wow.
Oh, fabulous Frankie Pierce. Of course, on our list of top presidential drunks.
Yep.
He was a partying man in his younger days. Tried to reform a little bit, fell back into it. A lot of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sad, lonely drinking.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's the Gipper here.
Yeah, you got younger Franklin Pierce kind of in college or maybe his early congressional days.
Yeah.
You'd characterize that as
yeah.
partying. But then
Later on, it's just sad.
it became a party of one.
Yeah.
And it was pretty tragic by the end.
And GC, on the other hand, he loved going out, loved food, loved beer.
Yeah. Grover
Loved a good
Cleveland,
time.
Drinking huge tankards of beer, remaining a bachelor all the way into his presidency until he married a very young girl.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, just because Pierce was like the bigger alcoholic doesn't mean that he was the bigger partier of the two.
Yeah.
Cleveland could just handle his shit better.
Yeah.
You know, I think Cleveland takes this.
Yeah, I think he does. There's all the different stories about him partying it up in Buffalo.
Yeah,
And
of course, there's a child born out of wedlock, and all
Yeah.
these other married men are under suspicion of potentially being the father. Grover Cleveland going to take the rap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for the crew.
He was out there having a good time. And he's the sheriff. He'd be out at the bar till it's past closing time. The bar owner has fallen asleep. Or no, it was not yet closing time. The bar owner fell asleep. Grover Cleveland
Adjusted the
turned
clock.
the clock ahead till it was past the legal closing time. Woke the guy up and pretended to arrest him for
Yeah.
staying open too late. That's the kind of pranks that Grover Cleveland was pulling.
Yeah, that's it, man. GC. Stephen Grover Cleveland going to take us as the biggest partier. Eking out Franklin Pierce.
Yep, and we're going to go 2 more categories.
We have Best Educated and Who Would Make the Best Supreme Court Justice.
Finally, I get some categories that are right up the alley of the cards in my hand.
Well, we'll see how mine match up against them. We're starting with Best Educated. I'm going with Teddy Roosevelt.
I went with John Quincy Adams.
Okay. Well, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, he obviously had a privileged education. His family could afford great tutors. He studies overseas. He learns a lot. He has a great education. However, John Quincy Adams, who at 11 years old is probably smarter than 9 out of 10 40-year-olds today.
Yeah.
In the top notches of society, you know.
Yeah, their education's kind of similar.
Yeah.
In that they did receive educations in Europe before going to Harvard.
Right.
JQA at the University of Leiden, which was a very prestigious European university, so much so that when he got to Harvard, it was almost like a step down,
Yeah.
like pretty significantly.
Well, that's the thing. Like, when you got JQA showing up at Harvard and being like, well, this is like nothing compared to what I've already done. Holy shit. You know, he's top notch in this category.
Yeah.
Hard to best.
Yeah, TR went to 1 year of Columbia Law School. JQA studying law before the law school era, but
Yeah.
studying under some of the most eminent lawyers.
And then just the education, even informal, that he gets abroad.
Yeah.
You know, hard to match. Mm-hmm. I think this is an easy JQA victory.
Yeah. He's going to edge out TR here. And then we got who would make the best Supreme Court justice. I've got William Howard Taft.
Wow. Okay. And I got James Garfield.
Wow.
I think, you know, Taft, I mean, Christ, he did make a Supreme Court justice, not just a Supreme Court justice, Chief Justice.
Yeah.
Garfield, I think he would have been great. Garfield's a stand-up dude. I like James Garfield.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything wrong with him as a Supreme Court justice at all. I think
Yeah.
he would be fantastic in the role.
Mm-hmm.
However, he's going up against William Howard Taft, who was really made for that role.
Yeah.
That was where he really shone.
Yeah, he was an Ohio State Court judge, then a federal appeals court judge before becoming president. And then, of course, after his presidency, became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was probably in the top small handful of Chief Justices of all time in terms of his role as Chief Justice and his administrative reforms of the court. And then just overall, probably a top 10 Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
By any measure. That was the role he was born to play and the category he was born to be drawn in.
That's
in the
it.
presidential
That's
war.
really it. Now, Garfield, I mean, he did discover a proof for the Pythagorean theorem in 1876 using a trapezoid.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant man. Great mind.
Very smart.
But in this particular category,
Yep.
Big Bill Taft is going to waddle away with it. And that'll bring us to 4 more cards. And let's see what kind of excitement we could get into here next. Ooh, it looks like I got some modern fellas. We have, who would you rather have date your daughter, and best president overall?
I feel like I have some pretty clear choices here.
Here we go with who would you rather have date your daughter? I went with George Herbert Walker Bush.
I went with William McKinley.
There you go. George Bush comes from a good family. Athletic. Veteran. Seems pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
Got a good head on his shoulders. I'm going to feel pretty comfortable and pretty relieved that my daughter chose somebody like that.
Yeah, he's a pretty solid choice. I think William McKinley, also pretty solid guy. A war veteran as well.
That's for sure.
Pretty successful lawyer. Very well-liked young man. And then I think really the way that he conducted himself in his marriage, he really shined, of course, when he asked Ida Saxton to marry him. Her father said, quote, "You are the only man I have ever known to whom I would entrust my daughter."
That's saying something.
Perhaps the best quote you can have when it comes to this category.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because, Ida became very ill.
Yeah, and he dealt with that phenomenally well.
Yeah.
Even later on, when she would start to have a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
The way he cared for her and tended to her in a public setting to take the attention away from this disability,
Mm-hmm.
top notch. I mean, great dude. And, George and Barbara Bush had a great marriage.
Yeah, pretty solid.
I'm leaning towards McKinley just for the way he handled Ida's condition.
Yeah.
If that says anything, it says to me, this man cares.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's going to be there for your daughter no matter what happens.
Right.
And you got, of course, her father admiring him so much. And I think at times he even, thought that he would give up his political career to kind of focus on taking care of her. And she was like, no, you got to do, you got to follow your dreams. But also, he's willing to make any kind of sacrifices he has to make for his wife.
Yeah, pretty noble shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, George W. Bush, looking at it from a father's perspective, I'd be like, man, that's Prescott Bush's son?
Mm-hmm.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think from a more noble standpoint, maybe Bill McKinley takes this.
Yeah. I think McKinley's sneakily one of the top most cards in that category due to how he treated his wife
Yeah, maybe so.
and how much her father liked him, which was the name of that game there.
Yeah. Let's see. That's going to bring us to best president overall. Okay, here we go. Showdown.
I'm going with James K. Polk.
I'll be playing Richard Nixon.
Nice.
So Nixon, I'd say solid president, just fucked up and got caught.
Yeah.
You know, I think other people did it before and got away with it. I'm not gonna defend him. Certainly not. He was definitely an asshole. He definitely fucked up, you know, and he was obviously, you know, a bigot and something, you know, a little bit of a racist maybe, you know, not a fantastic dude, but some of the stuff he did as president was okay, you know, legit.
He was pretty solid. You know, if this was an alternate universe where the Watergate burglars had never been caught and Nixon had served out the rest of his presidency without a scandal like that, he would probably be remembered as one of the better presidents.
Yeah.
And he could maybe go toe-to-toe with James K. Polk in this category.
Not, you know, not the way it is. Polk, he's pretty much, in my opinion, I think he's what you want in a chief executive, somebody that's willing to just throw themselves into the job. I mean, his work ethic is unmatched amongst all presidents, I think. If there was a category for best work ethic and you had Polk, he'd win every time against anybody. Was he a racist piece of shit? Yeah. Not a wonderful human being, but, you know, he threw himself into what he was doing. And that was his sole focus.
Yep.
And, you know, he accomplished more in his, you know, he set himself up as a lame duck. You know, and he accomplished more than almost any other president.
Yeah, I mean, he accomplished pretty much everything he set out for himself, was successful. Really, there's probably not any president more successful in what he tried to do than James K. Polk.
No, I don't think so. I can't think of anybody else that named out what they wanted to do and then did it in 4 years.
Yeah. There's like a handful of presidents that are just kind of uncannily succeeding at everything they try. And Polk was definitely one of them.
And that's despite some pretty fierce opposition.
Yeah.
You know, he was able to make it work. You got to go Polk here.
Polk,
No doubt.
taking it from Tricky Dick.
And let's see what we got here now. We got 2 cards left, 2 new categories coming up. We got looks and who would make the best military general.
Interesting. Wish I got that military general category earlier when I had Taylor, Washington, and Grant in my hand, and the question was who should be Attorney General.
Yeah.
But we'll see how we fare this time.
Starting with looks.
And I had old John F. Kennedy.
There he is, JFK, looking good. And he's going up against that classic Roman sort of look with John Tyler. That Roman nose, the lengthier curly hair. Not a bad looking fella.
Yeah, John Tyler, pretty handsome.
Scored a really hot wife.
Yep. John Tyler, a pretty impressive record of betting young, attractive women as president, but that record is really held by John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, I think you're right. John Tyler, I mean, I don't know. There's like a Peter Cushing look, almost.
Yeah.
The cheekbones, high cheekbones, that Roman sort of nose. I mean, not a terrible looking dude, but JFK is, I mean, he was like a model president.
Yeah, John Tyler has that character actor look, whereas JFK has the movie star good looks. He was just the most photogenic man for the era of TV.
Yeah.
Just had women throwing themselves at him by the droves.
That's it. Yeah, you got to give it to JFK.
He's taken the category of looks.
And now we have who would make the best military general. And I went with LBJ.
And I went with Civil War draft dodging Grover Cleveland.
There you go. I could picture both of them doing it.
Mm-hmm.
LBJ, a tough Texan. I mean, yeah, this is kind of a shit contest. You got a draft dodger, and I mean,
yeah, what was LBJ doing in World War II? He served as a lieutenant commander in the Navy from December 1941 to July 1942. Not a long career.
No, I mean, he was pretty focused on politics.
Okay, yeah, he got elected to the House of Representatives, and he was already in the House of Representatives by the time World War II started. And he resigned his commission in 1942 in compliance with President Roosevelt's order that all congressmen in the service resume their legislative duties. So he had that to fall back on.
Yeah.
While in the Navy, his plane survived an attack by Japanese aircraft over New Guinea, and he earned the Silver Star and a citation from General MacArthur for gallant action.
Well, there's something to be said.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Neither of these two really that much of a military-type character.
I mean, Johnson has more of a background, definitely, but whether or not that would make him better in this role is tough to say. I mean, I think I'm leaning towards him just because he actually served.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel confident Cleveland could run about anything. He could run a soup kitchen good.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Because Johnson, his style of leadership was not the kind that you would think of as like for a military general. He's very much like a backroom, backslapping.
Yeah.
That's what he really excelled at, and that's the kind of thing that the general doesn't really have to bother himself with.
Right.
Whereas Cleveland, he's another one of those workaholics, kind of like Polk. Maybe not to the Polk degree, but
close.
He was the kind of guy who would read every legislative bill in minute detail.
Yeah.
He was pretty well studied and, just a smart, good overall administrator. But, it's hard to give him this category given how he paid for a substitute to get out of the Civil War.
That's the problem I'm having, because I feel like maybe from a technical standpoint, Cleveland would be superior. But experience-wise, no question, LBJ.
Yeah.
That's a tough call.
Yeah, I'd probably give it to LBJ here.
I'll take it. And another 4 cards to come up. And let's see what categories we have this time around. We have pre-presidential accomplishments and whose family member would make the best president. Some interesting choices here. Alrighty, pre-presidential accomplishments. I went with Thomas Jefferson.
Wow. I went with Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover's pre-presidential accomplishments pretty great from a humanitarian standpoint.
Yeah.
Now, Jefferson, in terms of a nation-building standpoint,
yeah,
which does eclipse.
I think Hoover's pre-presidential accomplishments could stand up to many mere mortal presidents.
Right.
Not the revolutionary hero of Thomas Jefferson. Hoover, more of a humanitarian than Jefferson.
Yeah. Jefferson, of course, authored the Declaration of Independence.
Yep. You might have heard of it.
Yeah. There's a chance.
Yeah.
Tough to beat TJ in this.
Yeah. Herbert Hoover was a mining engineer, a financier, and then during World War I, he organized he was head of the Commission for the Relief of Belgium, organizing relief for the poor invaded country of Belgium, and then once the U.S. entered the war, he ran the American Relief Administration, distributing some 34 million tons of American food and $5.2 billion worth of supplies. A master administrator, and then he went on to serve as Secretary of Commerce under Presidents Harding and Coolidge, where he gave Coolidge a lot of unsolicited advice, according to Coolidge.
Yeah.
Pretty accomplished, but really not in comparison with Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to match TJ here.
Yeah.
Pre-presidentially.
Declaration of Independence.
Secretary of State, Vice President.
Minister to Britain.
Right. A lot going on.
Pretty epic pre-presidential career for Jefferson.
He is going to take that one, which brings us to whose family member would make the best president? Now, this is always an interesting one because you got a lot of choices here.
Mm-hmm.
I went with Benjamin Harrison, and I'm going John Scott Harrison.
Wow. I went with Andrew Johnson. There's a lot to choose from in the Johnson family. If you listen to our last top 5,
right?
I think I'm going to go with his second son, Richard Johnson, who served as personal secretary to President Andrew Johnson.
Yeah.
Until he was enmeshed in a prostitution scandal for bringing prostitutes into the White House. Then he was kind of shepherded off to an asylum. And then, he was, an alcoholic. And then a few weeks after his father stopped being president, he committed suicide. But he had that White House experience.
Sure. Presidential material.
John Scott Harrison never worked in the White House that I know of.
No. You have a point there.
I didn't have a lot to choose from in this hand, so...
Yeah.
I just went with my gut.
Yeah, John Scott Harrison, had a pretty successful career in his own right.
Yeah.
I
think he made it to the House of Representatives.
Yeah. Was a lawyer.
Yeah. The son and father of presidents.
Right.
John Scott Harrison. Seems like he would have fit right in as president.
Yeah.
No one could have sneezed at that.
Yeah, I think he's going to take it.
Yeah.
And here we go with the penultimate 2. Let's see what categories we have. We have most underrated, and we have most accomplished vice president. So let's see what we have here.
Well, I find myself in a bit of a pickle, but I think I can split the difference here.
No, I don't like this at all. All right, so let's see what we got here. We got most underrated coming up, and we're going to be referring to our C-SPAN poll.
Yep, the amalgamation of historians ranking the presidents put together by C-SPAN. I believe this is the 2017 iteration of their poll. And I'm going with Calvin Coolidge.
I went with James Monroe. We got James Monroe at 13.
Calvin Coolidge at 27.
Wow.
I think Calvin Coolidge is one of the most underrated guys on this list.
I am going to totally agree with you. They have Coolidge below Carter, Ford, Taft, Grant, JQA,
Obama, Wilson, Bill Clinton, LBJ. I counted about at least 12 people that are above Coolidge that I think are clearly not above Coolidge.
Yeah. Well, that seems like cake. James Monroe's at 13. That seems...
That's pretty solid.
Yeah,
it's kind of...
maybe generous.
There's a handful of people that are above him on this list that probably should not be, but there are also probably a few below him that could easily be above him.
James K. Polk is below him.
Right. He's probably about where he belongs, maybe give or take a few spots. But Coolidge, he needs to be substantially higher.
I would say he's criminally underrated on this list.
When we get up to the Coolidge episode not too far from now, our listeners will probably agree an underrated man on this list.
Yeah. Yeah, he's going to take this one.
Calvin Coolidge getting some vindication on the Dead Presidents podcast. And in order to win that category, I had to basically forfeit this category.
Well, we'll see.
Which is most accomplished vice president. I went with Chester Arthur, who had no vice president.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm not as worried. Harry Truman, who had Alvin Barkley. And Truman, having been kind of shunned in his own role as vice president, did try to include Alvin Barkley in affairs of state. He was briefed regularly on policy matters and sat ex officio on the newly established National Security Council. He was the first to be dubbed the Veep, a contraction coined by his 10-year-old grandson.
Wow. And Vice President Barkley, while he was in office as vice president, married a woman who was, 33 years younger than him.
That's absolutely correct. He was 71 when he married Jane Hadley, a 38-year-old widow.
Which makes him number one on our top 5 vice presidential cradle robbers list.
That's right.
If we ever do one of those. He had previously been in the Senate, and I believe returned to the Senate after being vice president.
Not too shabby.
Whereas Chester Arthur had no vice president.
Yeah, unfortunately nothing to speak of, and that's the unfortunate luck of the draw.
And that's going to bring us to the final 2.
Let's see what we
We've
got.
got 2 cards left and 2 categories.
We have who would make the best Treasury Secretary, and we have who would win in a fight. Alrighty, best Treasury Secretary. Here we go. I went with Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Wow. I went with Jimmy Carter.
Okay. FDR, he's from a family from money. He knows money. Yeah. He's all about that cabbage, that sweet scratch.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that he could deal with it.
Well.
Or he could waste a lot of money with socialist schemes that don't pan out.
Perhaps. He was a traitor to his class, as the title of one biography
That's right.
states. That being the moneyed class. And then you got Jimmy Carter, who pulled up his own bootstraps as a peanut farmer, made it all the way to the presidency where he presided over a very bad economy.
Yeah.
That was not really humming very loud during his presidency. So he's not necessarily a good candidate for Treasury Secretary.
Well, I mean, I think Jimmy Carter is the type of person, I think he would put himself into whatever task. FDR, I could just see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that for FDR. You think he would be...
say in, what if in, 1924, he had been the unsuccessful vice presidential candidate under Cox in 1920,
mm-hmm.
and say 4 years later, if the Democrats would have won.
Yeah.
FDR,
mm-hmm.
he could have got a position in...
Yeah, I mean, FDR, he was Assistant Navy Secretary under Wilson. You could easily see him being named Treasury Secretary in the latter years of the Wilson presidency or something like that.
I could see it.
You think he would do a fine job. He's pretty solid at what he does.
Yeah, I mean, he was a pretty great politician.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, not that Jimmy Carter wouldn't do a good job at certain things or that he's not a competent dude, but I think FDR just really outshines him.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. And now down to the wire.
Well,
final category. Who would win in a fight? And what is the final showdown, James? We got Barack Obama
versus Dwight Eisenhower.
Didn't they go up against each other last time? I'm almost positive they
I
did.
think they went up against each other in maybe a different category. I think they went up against each other in the flag football category.
That could be it. The same things are going to be discussed.
Mm-hmm. A similar showdown.
Yeah, I mean, Ike got that military background.
Yeah.
Obama, like, you know, to somebody today, definitely seems like he'd be the more athletic. He's going to hit a three-pointer before Ike.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's going to windsurf before Ike.
True. Obama's, he's tall, he's in good shape, he's athletic. He's probably got a reach advantage on Dwight. But Eisenhower coming up in West Point, fighting in World War I.
Not to mention the football career early on. Brutal game with Jim Thorpe.
Yeah, he knows how to take punishment, certainly to a degree that Barack Obama has never experienced. Dwight Eisenhower, who would win in a fight? He went in a fight against Hitler's Germany and came out on top.
Right.
I think he's probably going to be able to dispatch Barack Obama.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on where you set it, because if it's at a certain point in his life, Eisenhower's smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day on the verge of a heart attack. You know, Obama, of course, smoked, but not anywhere near that heavy.
Yeah. Not always cigarettes, but he gave it up at some point. And I think if they're anywhere near like a similar point in their physical lives, though, Dwight Eisenhower probably going to be able to beat up Barack Obama. Transcontinental champion Barack Obama. He's come out of a tough run in the PWF to win the Transcontinental belt. Old Ike hasn't seen a lot of PWF action so far, but he could be coming up soon.
Indeed. Yeah, let's give it to him.
Dwight Eisenhower beating up Barack Obama to end this game of presidential war.
And that'll bring us to the card count. And we're back, and boy, it's one of them situations where we got a tie game, 22 cards apiece.
Wow.
So what does that mean, James?
Sudden death overtime.
That's it. We got our cards that we've won. We've reshuffled them and the categories. We are going to draw one category. It could be from any place in the deck. And pick one card. Could be from any place in the deck. And we're going to go head to head and see who is going to win this bout.
The stakes have never been higher in the history of presidential war.
That's it. And here we go. Where do we want to draw our category from? I'll spread them out a little bit. You can pick one. All right. Let's go category. What do we got? Most accomplished vice president. And who do we have? I have Grover Cleveland.
I have William Henry Harrison.
Okay. So Grover Cleveland, let's see. I got first term Cleveland.
Now, in the category of most accomplished vice president, you can take into account the vice president's accomplishments up to and including the vice presidency. So, William Henry Harrison with John Tyler, I can only count John Tyler up to the moment of William Henry Harrison's death.
Yeah.
Which just after that moment is when Tyler really comes into his own.
Yeah, that's it. Grover Cleveland, he had Thomas Hendricks of Indiana, who served from March until November 1885. Doesn't seem like a long time, because it isn't.
He died.
He
in
died of a
office.
stroke.
His accomplishment was to help prompt the passage of the Presidential Succession Act of 1886.
That's exactly
Because
right.
we can't have the vice presidency be vacant without someone in line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
What did he do before he was vice president? If I recall, Thomas Hendricks, I believe that he may have accidentally passed information to a Confederate spy because he was trying to sleep with her. That's the one fact that I recall about him.
Ouch. Well, let's see. He was elected governor of Indiana, 1873 to 1877, first Democratic governor to take office in the North after the Civil War. In 1876, he runs unsuccessfully for vice president on the ticket with Samuel J. Tilden. He was a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1880. That didn't work out. And in 1884, he runs for the presidential nomination again, but he's going to settle for the number 2 spot and then promptly die. So there you have it. Thomas Hendricks.
John Tyler. He became a member of the Virginia legislature way back in 1811 as a pretty young man. Then he went on to the U.S. House of Representatives for a good, looks like, 5 or 6 years. Back to the Virginia State Legislature, then governor of Virginia. Then the United States Senate, where he served for, looks like, about 9 years. And then back again to the Virginia State Legislature once again until he is chosen as vice presidential running mate of William Henry Harrison. John Tyler, known for his opposition to President Andrew Jackson while he was in the Senate. And he resigned when Virginia instructed its senators to vote to expunge Andrew Jackson's censure. He resigned rather than comply.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think you got to give it to Johnny Ty.
Yeah. Even though he's probably one of the few vice presidents to serve shorter than Thomas Hendricks.
Yeah.
He did maybe have the most memorable place of any vice president in a presidential campaign slogan.
That's for sure.
You can sure say that.
Yeah, I mean, he was in public office for a really long time. His family had history there, with his father being buds with Thomas Jefferson, and, you know.
Yeah. John Tyler, I think he gave the official eulogy of Jefferson because he was governor of Virginia at the time of Jefferson's death. Saw himself as the next Thomas Jefferson, and maybe he didn't quite reach those heights.
But I think he's still going to take his hand and therefore give you the victory in this game of presidential war.
Wow. A victory that I owe very
To
much
John
to
Tyler.
John Tyler because he was more accomplished than Thomas Hendricks and also uglier than John F. Kennedy.
There you go.
I needed him at multiple times during this game.
As always, another interesting and intellectually stimulating game of presidential war. And there will be more to come. For the Dead Presidents Podcast, I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And I'm James J. Hamilton.
We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening.